Well, for those of you that are new, first of all, welcome. But basically, I'll start talking a little bit about the author and about the book, and then we share experiences, we share different, I'll try to trigger some thoughts. And please, if you have not read the book, that's okay too. If you've read part of it, that's fine. We're just glad to have you with us. So.
Yeah, and for those that haven't met Wendy and I, so I'm Carolyn from JourneyWoman, and Wendy Brooke is we're like the co-host now,
yeah,
like
yeah.
Book talk here.
Yeah.
And we've been doing this for about a year. So
yep.
So every month we kind of travel to a different place. And we were just saying that the next we're going to have to make some decisions around the next 3 books, because we've got I think July and August sorted out, or no, June and July sorted out.
Yep.
And then we need to look at the rest of the year. So I spent a lot of time last week putting together a list of memoirs written by women, which we just published today. So feel free to look through that. And then what we have to do is of the books that we like, that have all been recommended by all of you and others, and there's quite a long list, is we look at availability and price and all of that, and try and find books that we think are going to be interesting and compelling and a little different from the ones that we read before. So, and we also are trying out the idea of a subscription box. And Marianne, I see you there, and I want to thank you for sending in your beautiful photos of you with the book box. But I'm curious, has anyone looked at that or tried it? Do you know what I'm talking about, or is it new? So
I did.
Carolyn, it was wonderful. It was just wonderful to have them on Kindle. I just love it. Thank you. And I got all 3 of them. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we were having problems with arrival times of the books. So we were trying to think of how we could do them in a little bit faster, and also give you a way to buy them in a more cost-effective way. So that's what the book box is, and I'll put a link in here for you to take a look at. It's even though we've read 1 of them, there's 2 more, and so we're going to try and do them 3 at a time so that you've got everything in advance and can read it. And to be completely honest, it's a little more expensive for Canadians than it is for Americans because of the shipping. So maybe that will change in the future, but that's a little out of our control. But I might look at getting something specific for Canada too at some point. So that's where we're at. So we'll get started. So I think we've met the new folks tonight. Is there anyone else that's joined that's new, or? Okay, so you'll all get to know each other, and in this, and thank you again for coming. I wanted to let you know that I had a few conversations with Alice Morrison, who wrote this book. She actually sent me a note and said, "Thank you for picking my book," and then that turned into a whole conversation, because then I asked her if she would like us, what charitable organization she'd like us to support as we've been doing for the last few months. And so she gave me 2. One was a charity that supports donkeys and mules, and the other was a charity that supports girls getting an education in Morocco. Mm-hmm. So I went for the latter because I felt like we've done some work this year with sea turtles and different animal organizations, but we haven't done enough with girls. So that's the one that we're supporting tonight, and it's called Education for All, based in the Atlas Mountains. Tonight we thought we would explore some themes in the book club, and Wendy's going to lead that discussion, and then we have some photographs that Joan and I were going to share, and just talk a little bit about Morocco for those of you that haven't been there, and those of you that have. We'd love to hear your tips and advice. And I personally think it's one of the most beautiful places I ever went to, but I don't know that I would go there solo. But we can talk about that. We can talk about that as we go through this. So any questions before we get started? Any comments?
Mine's just a quick comment. Thank you so much to you and Wendy for putting this together. I really look forward to it. And I feel like those of us who have traveled, it's like a separate little tribe in the world, because people who haven't traveled, what do you talk to them about other than, I mean, you can't talk to them about traveling because they just don't get it. So thanks for all the effort you put into this.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I love books. So I'm a bookworm. So this just feels like fun with friends. I wish we could all just have a glass of wine and sit in a circle together and be in the same room. Maybe someday that will happen. So Wendy, over to you.
Okay, so first a little bit about the author. Alice Morrison was born in Edinburgh, and as a very young child moved with her parents to Africa and spent her young girlhood sort of in the outback of Africa with a lot of freedom to explore. And when she was 11, she was shipped back to Edinburgh to boarding school. And that's where she ended up completing her studies and went to university in Edinburgh as well, where she studied Arabic and Turkish. And when she finished school, she wasn't quite sure what to do. So she went to Cairo for a couple of years and taught English, and then came back and became a journalist. And she's worked in a number of places. She started out in Dubai. She then worked for the BBC, both in BBC England and as well as BBC Arabic. What I find fascinating about her, and she talks about it a little bit in the book, is she's also quite a physical adventurer. And by that, I mean a bicyclist and a runner. A couple of things she did, and she mentions in the book one of them, but let me just, one of them she did was the Tour de Africa, which is a 12,500 kilometer bicycle race that goes through 10 countries in 100 days. And they have 20 days rest, but the rest is on the bike for 12,500 kilometers. She also has participated in a couple of different large marathons. One of them that she does talk about in the book is the marathon, I don't know how to pronounce it, des Sables or something. It's basically 6 marathons all put together. You run 6 days, a marathon a day, except in the middle, there's one day that you run 2 marathons. I mean, and this is all, that's all, and there in that one, you are carrying your own food and your own equipment while you are running 6 marathons in 6 days. She then stopped and did this feature for BBC, which I have not seen yet, but now that I've read the book and after we finish, I'm going to go online and look at some clips from the BBC that she's talking about, the special that she's talking about in the book, which is from Morocco to Timbuktu. Since that time, she's gone on and done, in 2008, that was in 2016 and 17 that she did that. 2018, she did the Everest Trail Race, which is an ultra marathon of 150 kilometers around the base of Everest in 6 days. So for me, who's sort of a couch potato, I'm kind of in awe with some of the physicalness that she's done. She's written 3 books. This is her second book. Her first one is called Dodging Elephants, and that was talking about her ride across Africa from Cairo to Cape Town, which is an 8,000-mile ride that she took. And then she did the book that we're talking about. And then since then, she's done Adventures in Morocco, which came out in February of 2000, which is about her life in Morocco. So she's an interesting character. And the BBC, I thought it was interesting the way that this book is really sort of the behind the scenes of what was happening on her BBC adventure. So as we get started, I don't know, I personally liked the flow of the book. I thought it was easy to read and it did capture my attention. But let's start by chatting a little bit about Morocco. Who's been and who wants to go, who has not been, that would maybe like to go? And is there something in this book that may have spurred you on to want to go to Morocco? I can say I've not been, but I would love to go.
I've been in 2018, and I loved it. It was, I'd go back. I agree with Carolyn. It was the most beautiful place. Incredible.
And Marianne, you dear. You're on mute, Marianne.
I was just raising my hand that I want to go.
Yeah, yeah, yes.
But when you say it was beautiful, what do you mean? What was beautiful? The landscape, the people, the experience,
All of
the
it.
food. What makes you feel that?
I think the landscape was beautiful. I mean, I went all through the Atlas Mountains and I think the architecture as well, the moss, the ceramics, the yeah, I mean, it's very well preserved, really. I mean, a lot of places that I'm just trying to think. Menkes, did you go there, Diane or Dina? Which is a royal city that is very well preserved. So I just thought it was, and also I think it's a great. I went before. I've spent a lot of time in Spain, and I think going to Morocco before you go to Spain helps you understand Spain better, and all the different influences that you see in Spain and Granada and Seville and places like that.
The architecture is beautiful, and there is a lot of old architecture, historical, that is very beautiful to see. I must say, I don't know or appreciate all of the history of the various historical figures and what they represented, but it was very beautiful in both Casablanca and Rabat. I found Rabat was more conservative, was quieter, whereas Casablanca was was livelier and perhaps more touristy.
And I always think of in terms of Marrakesh back in the 60s, I'm gonna go to the Marrakesh Express. So, that's a totally different journey, I suppose. Yeah, Randy?
Yeah, so I was there last year.
Oh.
I did arrive as a solo traveler. I did take the ferry, and I mean, Alice, the book, the book starts off where she's crossing into Tangier.
Yeah.
I don't think they were on a ferry, but I found that her observations, like, when I went, and of course, it was the first time I had gone, and you come away from a place, and I wondered, well, was my take on things, like, was my experience solely from a touristic perspective, or were my observation, or was my experience, was there any authenticity to it? And a lot of stuff I didn't quite know what to make of it, especially Marrakesh, which I absolutely loved, and especially in the Jama Alfina. And so what I found was, when reading her descriptions and commentaries and stuff about different places, I realized, like, that was completely in line with what I saw, what I experienced, what I thought, what I perceived. And so I realized that my experience was a lot more authentic than I had thought, which was really exciting for me. I absolutely loved Morocco. The food is really amazing. And I did a lot of research on tracing back the history of the Jewish people in Morocco, which, she also mentions that a lot through the book. I had no idea how rich that history was. And although there aren't very many Jews there now, except for in Casablanca, they have preserved that history as well. Preserving their history is very important. So anyway, I enjoyed the book a lot, and Morocco was wonderful. I did have a guide meet me at the port, and he did show me around Tangier and kind of show me how to make my way on my own. So, and then I did later on hook up with a tour group. So I did kind of a little bit of both, but I think, paying a guide or getting, she talks about having fixers. I'd say that Morocco is a country where, as a solo female traveler, you might want to have a fixer or a guide or something to kind of give you some perspective.
I signed up on a tour for November. I hope it goes. But I was just wondering, how would how would it be for a vegetarian? She talks about eating meat endlessly.
No, there's a lot of food. I mean, there's a lot of food there. You can get whatever they have lots of vegetables that are terrific and lots of really great dairy. If you eat dairy, their cheeses are incredible. It's all goat and sheep and whatever. It's incredible. But no, you can definitely manage there as a vegetarian. Absolutely. Lots of nuts. There's the diet is super varied.
Yeah, and there are other, after about 3 weeks of the food, I really needed something else. So there are, and I wondered when I went, why are there pizza places and Italian restaurants? And I think that's why, because after a certain amount of time, you just want to kind of go back to your food for a little bit and have a little break and come back. Because it's also quite, I find the tangines and things like that can get quite rich. So the food's
I
great.
traveled in Asia for 4 weeks for work. And, you know, we ate really local. And then about 3.5 weeks, I looked to my colleague and I'm like, can we go to McDonald's?
Yeah.
I never eat that at home, but I'm just like, no, the food was great, but let's just go to McDonald's tonight.
Yeah, every once in a while when you're traveling like that, and when the food is very different than your local cuisine, every once in a while you just want that taste of home.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things a couple of people brought up is the idea of safety, and you know, safety as a single person there, and our author talks about it as well, and she talks about some safety tips, and she mentions that when she gets into a room, she looks at the position of the exits. Did the fire doors open? Was there a way to get out over the roof? Did my room have any way to get out of if the door was forced? Did the bathroom door have a door that opened outwards as it's harder to force in? And was there anything I could wedge against the door? Now, those were some of her tips. What are some other thoughts that you have maybe had when you're traveling alone? First of all, I thought those were a really good list of tips. I didn't think about the bathroom door opening out before, but now from now on, I'll be looking for that. But what are other tips you may have thought of when you're traveling and you're not sure, you had that feeling of not quite feeling safe and you want to check?
This is Nicole again. When I was traveling in Bali by myself, my room had a sliding glass door, and I know they're not very secure. So I moved the table in front of the door, and I'm like, okay, if they come in, they're gonna make noise. Yeah. You know. Right. So sort of think about that. But the good side of that is you have, you know, another exit. There's not just one exit.
Right. That's one of the things I always do when I get into it. If I'm in a strange place, is I check all the windows to make sure that they're locked or lockable. I've only run into trouble once, and that was when I was in Colombia. And it was when I was not in my room that somebody broke in and stole my computer and some other things. But I was perfectly glad because I wasn't there. But I normally, I do check, and if there's a sliding door or a window that's on a slider, I will try to put something to stop it from opening very far. But, and I usually travel with a door wedge.
Oh,
And, you know, those little plastic wedges, you can stick those right under the door. Those also are a good help.
I try not to stay on the first floor if possible.
I always make sure I either have a local SIM card or do roam like home, so that I know that I've got my phone close by, and I know where to call if somebody's breaking in.
And I still have my whistle always on my keychain.
Yeah.
Even when I'm traveling, I have that.
Yep. Another thing that I think you brought up a little bit, Randy, was some of the ethnicity. And one of the things she talks about is, she says, this country is a mosaic. We have Black, we have white, we have Arab, we have Berber, we have Jewish. We have lots of traditions, lots of culture. That's what makes this country very rich. Have you seen this in other places that you've traveled? I'm going to give, I'll start with, I would say when I moved to Canada, so I lived in the United States and in Europe for a while. I moved to Canada, and Canada to me, as from being somebody from the United States, there are some very significant cultural differences that we have.
Okay.
And you know, we don't want to admit, you know, a lot of times we say, oh, well, we're just the same, but we're not. You know, we do have very different cultures. And one of the things that I noticed personally is that, you know, we used to talk about America being a melting pot. I don't know that we really are, but we used to say we're a melting pot. And I think of a melting pot as being put all the vegetables in and stir them all up until they make one flavor together. Okay. I used to think when I moved to Canada, I thought of Canada as a stew where all these different cultures were together, but they really wanted to keep their own identities. Mm-hmm. And so, because I remember as an Irish American, I was taking Gaelic classes in when I lived in Canada. You know, I mean, there's that sense of your historical background that is really treasured, I think, more so in Canada than I see in the United States. And people, so it's more of a stew where you're keeping your individual identity, but you're mixing the flavors together. So Canada's I found that as a big difference between Canada. Yeah.
That was their policy of multiculturalism.
Right, right.
I mean, this is, sorry, Nicole, this is Nicole again. It's interesting for me because living in Houston, we're the most diverse city in the United States. So when I go to other places and they talk about how diverse it is, I'm like, this is not that diverse.
Right.
I lived in Singapore for a little under a year, and they talked about how diverse Singapore was. I'm like, it's 70% ethnically Chinese. As an American, I've never lived in a city that was 70% anything. So, you know, we have that, you know, that big diversity. I mean, it's super wide. You know, we have every cuisine, every type of person is very representative. The company the company I work in, we have all religions, all ethnicities. It's an international company headquartered here. So it's interesting to me when people talk about diversity. I'm like, okay, so you have 4 different kinds. Great. You have like 100. And I think, you know, speak 120 languages or something. So it's sort of what you're comparing it to. Mm-hmm. But I could say too, Singapore they keep things more distinct. They have sort of 4 main groups, and they all sort of speak their mother tongue at home, and they maintain that at school to some extent, but then they all speak English. And then that's their common sort of language, which is different here in the US. We sort of try to get everyone to speak English, right? Mm-hmm.
So I think it depends a little bit on how you define diversity, because even ethnically Chinese, there are different groups of Chinese people that are very different and don't always get along. Right. And so right now in China, the Han Chinese are the ones that are, you know, kind of in power and are discriminating against other Chinese groups. So, you know, I think I work at a university, and I was in China for a while, and I was amazed at how different the Chinese people look. And I hope that doesn't sound bigoted or anything, but yeah, it's like there was such diversity among the faces and the stature and among the Chinese people because of the different groups that they came from. So I think sometimes you have to kind of look a little bit below the surface to see the diversity.
I think that's probably true of any region if you really get into it. I've been to Zambia in Africa, and it's very clear that they'll talk about, oh, the Rwandans are different and the Congolese are different, the South Africans are different than the Zambians are. And so I think anywhere you go, there's going to be local distinctions that maybe aren't as evident when you're a long way away.
That's interesting because a lot of my Asian friends, you know, they would try to be nice and they're like, oh, let's go out for Caucasian food tonight. I'm like, what is that? Yeah. German, Italian, you know.
Back to the book, I have a burning question.
Sure.
Wendy, did you talk to Alice about the title? Because it's Morocco to Timbuktu, an Arabian adventure. And
I struggled with that one.
Arabia, it's in Africa.
Well, and even Arabia, I don't think of Morocco as being Arabian. I think of it being more Berber, maybe, or, you know, I'm not sure, but I struggled with that notion of Arabian when she talked about Morocco and Timbuktu.
Yeah, it doesn't fit.
I mean, it has the language. The language is Arabian, I guess they do speak that, but, you know, ethnically, it's only partially Arabian.
That
Interesting.
said, I really liked the book.
Mhm.
It really made me want to go to Morocco.
Me too. Me too. You know, she's very lucky because she knows the language.
Mhm.
And so I'm going to ask both those of you who've been there, did you find language an issue? And also for those of us who traveled either there or anywhere, do you learn that handful of polite
Always.
words to help you along your travels?
Always.
So those of you who've been to Morocco, how was it for language? Did you have any issues?
They
I was
also
part of
speak
a group, so a tour, so it really wasn't an issue. And the guide we had was very, very good and spoke excellent English. And actually happened to know quite a bit about Canada. So he was very good. And that's what, if I was to give a tip, and I think someone else, maybe Randy said, having a good guide really makes a difference.
Did they still speak French a lot?
Yes.
Oh,
I could, yeah, I found that my high school French that had been long lost, spoken wise, but I can still read quite well, and that was very helpful. It was very helpful.
Well, something,
Yeah,
do you see
Randy?
me? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I found that I can't see myself or whatever. I'm in the dark, so I don't know. That's what it is. I'm in the dark. Sorry, I need to turn a light on. So I found that, well, first of all, you know, they have official guides. So a lot of the local people aren't really going to deal with you as a foreigner, as a tourist. I mean, you know, they're pretty, you know, they have Sharia law there. Not to say that there aren't people with more modern points of view, and there certainly are Westerners there. There's certainly mixed couples and all of that. So, I mean, it's not to say that you can't, that you're not welcome. I mean, I was very welcomed, but there are, you know, they have an official tourist guide whole industry going. So it's, you know, helpful. I think it might even be kind of the legal way, you know, that you need to, if you hire a guide, it has to be an official guide. They'll tell you to make sure that they're an official guide and all of that. I speak Spanish, so I do speak a little French, but if English failed, or if my little bit of French failed, I also do a little bit of Arabic, but I could also always find somebody who spoke Spanish, especially in the northern part of the country. There were more people that speak Spanish, especially in Tangier. But the local people, a lot of them, especially the ones that are in the tourism industry that you're going to run into, or I mean, maybe not in a local shop, but maybe, you know, in some of the museums or things like that. I think that there's people are pretty multilingual, so you can find somebody that, you know, you can communicate with. So I didn't, even when like I was roaming around, like in Fes, I roamed around a little bit by myself. In Marrakesh, I was by myself a lot, but where really I would run into local people and we really did not speak the same language, but somehow we were able to communicate with each other.
I think that's one of the things about travelers, is that we realize that we can communicate. We may not have the same language, but we can find a way to communicate, regardless of where we are. It's just easier if you have a language, but communicating is, if that's key, it's pretty easy to do. what were some of the people's favorite sections in the book, or favorite areas, favorite parts?
Well, one thing I learned about that I knew nothing about was the Western Sahara separatist aspirations. And wouldn't you know, that's in the news now, because all these Moroccans that are going into the Spanish city, that's related to the Western Sahara separatist aspirations, because Spain took in one of the separatist leaders for medical treatment. Morocco has ceased to enforce its border. There's this Spanish city in Morocco on that side. And so the border's open and all these people are going into what's technically Spain. And I must say, in my atlas, the Western Sahara is shown as a separate country.
Interesting. What are some other parts? I thought it was interesting. I never thought about eating camel before. That just threw me completely for a loop. I don't know why. It's just, sorry, Carolyn. But I mean, and she really got into describing it quite a bit. And that's just an animal I'd never thought about as being a food. You know.
I think
and
that's
also, yeah, go on.
I'm sorry. I think so. I think I know, I don't know about Canadians, but I think they're similar to Americans. They're a little close to a horse for us, and it's just, we cannot think about eating a horse.
Yeah, right.
You know, even when I'm in Europe, you know, they eat that, and they're like, yeah, Americans. I go, yeah, there's just something, I don't know if it's the aura of the old West or something. We just cannot conceive of eating a horse or something so similar.
A horse is our pet.
Yeah, yeah. Our friends, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing I guess I always really thought that the humpback carried water in it.
But it's all, I mean, I knew it wasn't water, but I didn't realize it was like entirely fat.
Right, yeah, I mean, I thought there was something that was helped to hydrate them, but so. Has anybody ridden a camel before?
At the zoo?
Or any place, yeah, I mean,
I rode one in Egypt a few years ago, and it was a touristy thing, but it was still fun.
There's a camel trek in China that I'd like to take that goes up into the deserts, but I probably will never make that one now. But it was a dream for a while.
I found camels incredibly uncomfortable to ride on. And I only did it, you know, from the out to the tents for one and then back, and that was enough for me. And they're not the most pleasant animal either. They spit a lot and they foam, and so for me, that was long, and that was enough. I need not do that again in my life, I don't think.
Yeah. Now let me ask you a question. Do you ride horses at all?
Oh, that is a good question, Wendy. I love horses. They do not love me.
Because I was wondering how you felt riding horses versus camels.
Probably, yeah, the camel probably went, yeah, we don't like her.
And I will say that I grew up riding horses, and so for me, riding a camel, it was like, yeah, okay, this is fine.
Yeah.
It was different, but you know, it was okay.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
I read the book first, and then I was able to find the 2-hour BBC, and I would highly recommend, if you haven't watched it, to watch it, because the scenes just really come alive. And the one that I was thinking about was where she's stepping into all the liquid that helps at the tannery. Yeah. And it's quite a visual to see her in there and then peeling off the skin and the leather. So that was one of my memorable scenes in the book, but even more so in the BBC special.
When one of the things
taken to the tannery, I was with a small group. There were 7 of us with a local guide. And when he took us to the tannery, they gave us a bunch of herbs that were tied together and said, "Put it under your nose." And we went, "Oh yeah, nah." And then about 10 minutes later, everybody was walking around with herbs stuck. What a stench. Ooh, yeah, it was fascinating to watch them all squishing in the vats down there, but it was really smelly.
The sentence in the book that I loved, it said, "Before I met Nagub and Mohammed, I had always felt pity for the tanners because the job is so tough and the conditions are so harsh. But Nagub put me straight. He was fiercely proud of his craft." And I was thinking of that as we travel around the world and we look at these people and we think, oh, but they're so proud, and it's, they just love what they do. And to see someone passionate about what they're doing, even though we might think of it as like, oh, I think that's really special. So those of you who have been to the tannery probably saw that with the workers who were there.
One of the things that it also does, the tannery is a really good example of something that is being done today. It was also done years, way in the past. And it's that connection of present to past. And have you seen that in other, for those of us who have not been to Morocco, for example, have you seen that other places? Now, I did, for example, in the coffee plantations in Colombia. The hand picking of the coffee beans and laying them out to dry and putting them through a mill. And my friend who has a plantation in Colombia, it's a small family plantation. And so it's all done by hand. There's no mechanical, nothing is electric. And so it's just the way it was done 100 years ago, 200 years ago. So it's kind of that sense of you step into a place that you could be any time in the world. So have you experienced that in any other kind of situations?
In India, they're doing the textile arts in the old ways, like block printing fabric, dyeing with indigo, and tie-dyeing fabric, embroidery, weaving on hand looms.
In Guatemala as well, on the hand looms, as the tradition of the fierce pride. And I think, Mary, that's what you brought up. It's that pride that people have in their work that sometimes we don't see in a regular 9-to-5 job.
I've seen that even in Italy. I went to, I knew somebody that had an olive farm or orchard, I guess you'd call it. And they did all their own olive picking and smushing of the olives. That was kind of interesting.
I love fresh olives.
Yes.
Many small villages in Japan too, the ones I've been to, have both craft and food traditions that are ancient.
One of the things that with COVID, that in some cases, it's brought back some cooking traditions in families where people are all of a sudden learning from their grandmothers how to cook basic foods, so that handing down of the recipes as well. So the other question is, what about etiquette? Etiquette in Morocco, or etiquette in that part of the world. Both for those of you who've been and also just your observations from the book. I was surprised at how much quote unquote freedom she had in some of these countries. I would have thought she would have been more restrained, or that they would have been more controlled. But this idea of not knowing a stranger, people taking them in. One of my parts of the book that I like was when she traveled with the family to take their goats or whatever it was to harvest, and she just sort of became a part of that local scene. Now, she was lucky because she knew the language, but she was really very much accepted into the locals.
Do you think that is as a obvious Westerner, they sort of give more freedom to her than maybe a woman from that area? They sort of give allowances to an obviously
Perhaps.
Western person.
Perhaps. Diane?
Well, I was just one of the quotes I wrote down from the book that I think really represented her approach to people in general. That what I really liked about this book, to go back a little bit, was I enjoyed it so much because I felt her love for the people, her wonderment, her delight in everything that she did and the people that she met and the things that she saw, and her fascination by everything. But she says in the book, and I think in part it explains why she was so well accepted. I don't know how well other people would, because I mean, we're not just talking about Morocco now, we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa,
Right.
which is very different from Morocco.
Yeah.
Is the open delight with which, she's talking about Morocco here though, the open delight which you are met with in this country if you take the time to talk or play or have a tea, makes it a complete joy to live and travel to Morocco. These simple interactions make me so happy. And that comes through in the book. And she also says in the book that if she doesn't know the language, she will learn so many basic words. And some of the basic words that are important to her to learn are, she mentioned a bunch of them, but what were that? Including delicious and beautiful. She makes a point of using those often when she meets with people and talks with people. And I think it helps her connect with people. I think that's probably why she's well accepted wherever she goes. I mean, she certainly respects. And the other thing she mentions throughout the book is somewhere else. It's clear that she makes it clear to people that she not only respects them, but their culture. And it's important that they understand that. So I think it's pretty clear that she has a wonderful approach to meeting new people and being exposed to different cultures. And I think it does make a difference, you know, to what extent others would be accepted in the same way. Maybe if they did what she did, they would be too, you know, and again, maybe because she's a guest, and also being a guest in their country, they probably are reverential and respectful of her because she's also, it's mutual respect kind of thing, you know. But I was very impressed with, I truly, honestly, that's what I enjoy most, I think, about this book, is her delight in learning and in meeting people. And it comes through, it's pretty clear. And again, if you watch the videos, see the 2-hour documentary, it is amazing. I did the same thing. It is amazing how it all comes to life. And you can see the joy in her face. And no matter what she's doing, no matter how sloppy the job is, you know, and the tanning one is a really good example of one. But she goes down into the salt. When she goes down into the salt mines, you can see that too. But she connects with people. She has the ability to do that. I think it makes a difference.
You know, I think one of the things that struck me very different about this book versus last month's book is because both of them had very descriptive scenes. They described their physical surroundings, but this book really focused on the people.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
And I think also she got off this sort of beaten track a little bit. So people it's a more novel to interact with travelers. So I think maybe that, you know, they really appreciate that she's taking that effort. I know I try to do that. Like when I visited Bangkok, I just kept walking until I hadn't seen a Caucasian for like 10 minutes. And then I went to a restaurant and it was like the best meal I've ever had. I didn't speak Thai, but they were so appreciative of me being there, and it was all locals. And having grown up in a tourist place, I spent some of my childhood in the Keys. You know, when you're dealing with people who deal with tourists every day, there's a little fatigue with them, you know, you're not so interesting or novel, you know.
Do you think she was courted more esteem because she was with the BBC? I mean, not quite a celebrity, but obviously had crew and camera all around her.
I thought so. I thought perhaps that was part of it. Yes.
I think she was just so respectful. Like she knew, because she spoke Arabic, she knew the proper way to greet people. And so, you know, like auntie or uncle, and how are you? And she always knew you had to say all these other things before you kind of got to the meat of the question that you had. You know, it's like in Europe, you have to say hello to people when you go into a store, even though you might just want to look around, but it's part of the etiquette is that you say hello and you chat, and then you look around and do your shopping. So she knew the Arabic etiquette of what to say. And I think people appreciated that she knew that. It was very respectful, and I think it does make a connection.
I kind of thought that being that she was with the BBC crew might have offered her some opportunities that she might not have had. However, that was the opportunity, but it was her personal style that then captured that opportunity and made it into something. Because it could have been someone from the BBC that was very stuck up and very condescending and wouldn't have gotten anywhere, you know. But I think that may have opened some doors, but then I think she was the one who went through those doors and made the connections.
One of my questions is, how do we recreate that? You know, do any of us here speak Arabic? Do any of us here have the familiarity with Arabic? So in any country we go to, how do we recreate that when we don't know the language and we don't know the customs quite so well? And that's always a challenge when you go somewhere that you've never been. I mean, I always try to read the books before I go and learn as much as I can, but you know, we're not as fortunate, I guess.
Right.
Well, you know, she had fixers and guides everywhere she went. And she, you know, even in the end of the book, you know, she thanks those fixers, and she mentions how important they were to the whole thing. So, you know, I don't think that we'd have been reading this wonderful journal or whatever you want to call it, had it not been for the connections. I mean, you know, she was escorted through Mali with the UN security force. I mean, who gets a UN security force when you travel?
I think it's a valid question, because she also had lived in Morocco for a while, you know, and so she was familiar with the customs. She was familiar with the history because she had spent time there already before she took this trip. And I wonder, you know, that her trip may have been very different if she had come straight from Scotland and done the trip.
Right.
So I think there's some differences there. But I agree with you. But I think part of it is, I think no matter where you are, you can approach people with respect and with joy. And I think that can transcend so much, regardless of the language and regardless of the other customs, that if you go in with respect and joy, that gets you halfway there. So other comments before we turn it back to Carolyn and some pictures and see thoughts or ideas?
Can I just say, I loved also the descriptions about Mali and the Malian people, because that was really just like something else as well. And it was pretty rich, actually.
One of the things we haven't talked about is this idea of salt.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, it's interesting for me because I've spent a lot of time studying the Silk Road and a lot of time studying the logistics and transportation throughout Asia, throughout the Middle East. And I never really thought about the important, you know, salt is so important. And her descriptions of the salt, I found fascinating. You know, the blocks of salt and the big crystals of salt that you can carry. I thought that was very interesting as well.
I was going to raise the salt too, and particularly her talking about health problems caused by sea salt. I've never heard that.
Yeah, I haven't heard that either. That may be a local, you know, just like sea salt, people say that sea salt is better than other salt. So, you know, one can.
I've
can
actually
definitely-
heard that also, and at my house we use Himalayan or Himalayan salt. So
Yeah.
I've heard that too.
Okay, with that, Carolyn, I'll turn it over to you with some pictures.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask Joan to talk a little bit about her pictures. Can everyone see okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Joan, over to you. Do you want to explain?
This is the mosque in Casablanca, and it's situated on the coast. So it's a beautiful, beautiful site. It is huge. It is one of the largest mosques in the world, and relatively quiet for that time of day. But you can see the beautiful architecture, the beautiful blue sky. It's really, really impressive. Yeah, I think if you go to the next picture, yeah, there's a close-up of some of the tile work there.
Wow.
It's unbelievable. And then this is in Rabat. That this is I think the necropolis, or Hassan Tower in Rabat. And again, very contemplative, that you see that I always try to take pictures without people in them, that to get the full effect, and very beautiful. And then the last one, yes, this is the mausoleum of Muhammad V in Rabat. And you might think that the horsemen there are the sentries are there for as tourist attractions. They're not. They are there guarding the mausoleum. So those were just a few of the pictures that I took. I tried to select the best ones.
Thank you for that. These are a few of mine. So this is the Atlas Mountains, which is a really stunning place. And if I remember correctly, we drove from Marrakesh through them on our way out to the Sahara. So it took about a day or two. Although this was quite a long trip, as I said, so I can't remember exactly how long. And I was there in December and January. This is in that mosque that, that Joan was just referring to, with lots of tourists, but it's absolutely enormous.
It is
kind of
huge.
see the size just from the inside. And then this is Fez. So this is where you can look down into the pots of pigeon, I think it's pigeon poo and something water. And so this is a centuries old tradition of how they make leather, and the smell is horrific. There's no getting around that. But it's a great place to buy leather if you are interested in leather. I came home with, I think, 4 coats. And something we kind of touched on was the mint tea, the tea, but this is a real tradition in Morocco to slow down and have a tea ceremony with fresh mint crushed and sugar. They love sugar, which I think is another thing shared with Spain. But I did an afternoon with the French, I think it was called Maison Arabe, and did a whole cooking class, and then went out to gardens and learned how to make this tea. So it was very nice. And then this is Menkes, this is an abandoned, I think it was the stables where they kept horses. But really beautiful spot to visit if you're there. And I've put most of these on the website, or I have itineraries if anyone's interested. Another place is Volubis, which is Roman ruins, which is it's kind of unusual. I can't remember exactly where it is, but that was really nice. They're very well preserved, and there were guides there that just took us around as well. And then this is in the Atlas Mountains again.
Wow.
So I suspect this was quite typical of the places that she was.
Yeah, because she talks about the houses being made out of the mud, the red mud of the mountains.
Yeah. And this is in Risani. This is the market that she went to as well. And I have more pictures of this. It was crazy with the animals and the goats and everything else. We were there on I think we were there on New Year's Day, perhaps, or it was right after we had come back from the Sahara Desert. But yeah, that was quite the experience. And then we also went to where they make argan oil. So this is some of the ladies working on that. And then this is the tent that I was telling you about where I spent the night, freezing. Not really glamorous, by the way. And I think that was all I had to show you. But the other places I would suggest are Chefchaouen. It was a really beautiful place. It's a blue city. You've probably seen photos of that. I was only in Casablanca for one day, which for me was enough because it felt like a big city and it felt quite different from the rest of Morocco. I much preferred being out in the desert and in the small towns. So those are my photos.
Makes me want to go.
Well, the book too made me want to go back because I felt, even in the first chapter, I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't know all this when I went. And I feel like I missed things, and kind of want to return and have a deeper experience. So that's what the book did for me. It just made me more, kind of intensified my curiosity. And I think there are a lot of places I'd like to go back to. But she will be very happy to hear that we enjoyed it, I think. And I will ask her about the title. So yeah, she seems very sweet. She just sent me this little note. Thank you so much for choosing my book. And I thought, is this really Alice Morrison? I get a lot of spam, so I wasn't sure, but it was. So no, she tweeted about it and she was very excited. So yeah.
Now next month we're going to be going to the Caribbean on a sailboat. So unfortunately, I made the mistake. I got the books crossed. And so I read the sailbook book already. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, that's not the book for this month. So I quickly had to read our book, this month's book, and finish it last night. So, yeah, the sailboat. So we'll be going on a sailing cruise through the Caribbean. So.
Sounds good.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, that'll be a nice change, I think, for those of us that are stuck in the frozen north, right?
Not today.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's 30 degrees in Ottawa today. We're melting.
Yeah.
Wow. It's
30
warmer there
Celsius.
than it is here.
Yeah.
It's chilly in Texas today.
Can you post someplace I can find this documentary, how I would find it?
Oh,
There's a link in the chat.
I know I see that, but how do I save that?
Yep.
Marianne, I'll put it on the book page.
Thank you. That'll do it for me.
So don't worry, I'll put that on the book page.
Thanks
And yeah, I'll do that as an update, and then everybody can watch it.
Great.
So. Awesome. Good. Well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And next month we'll be in our tropical wear.
Yes.
And with our mangoes.
Right.
All right. Happy travels.
Okay.
Thank
See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.